Hello, friend. The mystical American Patriots Society is transmitting to you from beneath 4 million cubic feet of solid granite, in the burning heart of the Yellowstone caldera. This is a variety program for normal sandwich-eating Americans with some concerns about living in a deranged, post-Christian technocracy. So, keep your third eye on the sky and your ear to the ground, as Sumo and Smokestack connect your main brain vein to a higher plane. Are you ready? Stand by.
Sumo, can you read me?
I read you. I'm coming in. I've got my antenna hooked up on the top of the van. I'm picking up everything.
Where are you this week?
This week I am out in Slab City. I'm out in Slab City out here in California in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're familiar with Slab City. I'm sure our listeners are because they're vagrants mostly.
Mm-hmm. I've never heard of it. Is that a place where bums live? Sorry, vagrants.
It's a bums. It's a bit of a harsh term.
Yeah.
Let's just say, let's call them snowbirds.
Okay, snowbirds.
Snowbird. It's a place. It used to be, I think, like a military complex where they, did things, and then they blew it all up. I think in a training exercise or something.
Okay.
And so just the concrete slabs of the buildings remain.
Oh.
And so people come and they live on them, and they build temporary / not so temporary structures. And they usually come down here during the winter because it's so hot and leave in the summer. But there's a couple of people, one of our MAPS contact members who lives out here permanently because he's avoiding Big Brother, basically. Mm-hmm. Which is a thing, if you guys need to avoid Big Brother, the Big Brother's eye is not everywhere.
Right. Yeah, there are places you can go. Out
here in Slab City it's really sort of de facto anarchy. There's no police force or anything. It's just so far out in the desert. There's no cameras really. I mean, people have phones, I guess, so Google's listening, but I think everyone here is so schizophrenic that the algorithm doesn't know how to handle their search terms. Track them. So I think you're probably safe there. We have other MAPS members that live, of course, with the mole people in New York City's abandoned subway lines.
Mm-hmm. Is that real? Is that real? Is that a real thing?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, they're all over there. I mean,
how do they get their vitamin D?
They don't. They just get really pale. If you've ever crawled around in there, there's people that have lived underground in the forgotten New York City subway lines for decades.
Are you being serious with me right now?
Oh, 100%. 100% serious. They've lived there, and they have whole little communities. They pulled stuff that people have thrown in the gutter, like old mattresses and whatever. They've pulled it down there, made little houses way deep down in the dark, Mm-hmm. And there'll be like some guy there, and he's like, "Hi, my name is Dallas." Mm-hmm. And he'll talk for a while, then you'll find out that his girlfriend is also named Dallas.
Weird.
And then like their dog is named Dallas, and you never see the dog or the girlfriend. Mm-hmm. That's the sort of stuff. But Big Brother's not watching there. So if you need to go out and do clandestine metaphysical work, as I am currently doing, that's the sort of places you got to go, because this is a good location for me to do my operations at my secret nighttime operations at Goldstone.
Okay. You reconnecting with Phantom Limbs out there?
No, Goldstone they run one of NASA's largest satellite dishes out in the desert. Mm-hmm. And it's used to track Cassini and other space satellites, and I don't want to say what I'm doing, but there's data they're not letting out to the public. That's just what I'm saying.
Sweet.
And I'm trying to tap into that data from that satellite.
Okay.
But that is a really great place for underscoring the need for physical activity, though. Mm-hmm. Fattest NASA scientist you will ever see.
At Goldstone?
Yes, because it is very hot here, especially in the summer. It gets up to like 120, 125
Woo.
Fahrenheit, not Celsius for our British people. But I mean, they use Fahrenheit too. You know, British people are schizophrenic about that. They just use whatever makes it sound worse. Like if it's real hot, they'll be like in Fahrenheit, and if it's real cold, they'll be like, oh, it's 0. You know, instead of they just use whichever one makes it sound more dramatic. But in Goldstone, it's all flat, and it's in the middle of the desert and Death Valley and stuff, and it's so hot. So no one moves, and when they have to move, it's completely flat, and all of the scientists are fat.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you go to like the JPL and you hack their servers, that's on the side of a mountain, also in California, and all the scientists there are of normal weight.
They get a lot of cardio.
Just because walking up and down the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm here. I'm doing that, and I'm also installing calisthenics equipment for the homeless to help them get in better shape.
Mm-hmm.
Putting in a sumo wrestling ring, a dojo as it's called.
Sounds unsanitary. I'm going to be honest.
Which one, the calisthenics or the dojo?
Really, all of it. But wrestling, homeless sumo wrestling just sounds kind of grimy.
Well, let's say they're not. I mean, they have a home. It's just not in a traditional sticks and bricks house, is it?
Okay.
It's just living on the top of a concrete slab.
Okay.
Homes take all sorts of different shapes, you know?
That's true. Especially if you're trying to get out of the eye of Big Brother. Yeah.
And there's lots of different places you can do that. And I hope to teach all of our maps people how to get out of the eye of Big Brother.
Really, there's a world out there. I mean, if you're not in a megacity and you're not on the internet, pretty much everything else is, you've got some degree of privacy.
Look, have you ever gone out? You can go out into the woods so far, and you still find people out there, and that's the scariest guy. Like you think you're worried about a Bigfoot or a bear or something, but if you're like 100 miles out in the backcountry, and there's just some guy, that's creepy.
That's
like,
the guy you got to worry
out
about
there. And then he's like, "What are you doing out here?" It's like, good point. And sometimes you'll find traces of people. Like you'll find just like you'll be like down in a canyon in Idaho or whatever. And then there'll be like some panties inside a crag of a rock. You're like, what? What's going on? What are people doing? No telling.
Maybe that's the Bigfoot thing. Is really just weirdos are finding each other's traces.
I think that's. I'm not a big squatcher.
Okay.
Although the recent discovery of the billy ape in Congo, I think it's called the billy ape, makes that's a point in their favor.
What is that?
It was a new ape that was found, I think in 2009 or something. Anyway, it's a big ape. It's like 7 foot tall.
Whoa!
But it stands straight up, and it often does stand straight up, which is weird. And it looks its body looks sort of chimpanzee-ish, but its head looks sort of gorilla-ish.
Okay.
It's got these ridges. It's apparently very mean. The locals said that no one's captured it on video yet, to my knowledge. They've just found corpses. Anyway, the locals say they've seen it. They call it the lion killer. It grabs jaguars and just picks them up and breaks their back by throwing them on the ground and then eats them.
That's brutal, dude.
So anyway, we just a decade ago found a brand new 7 foot tall ape that no one had ever heard of. So why not one in Washington State?
Yeah, why not?
I don't know. Maybe. I don't think so. But my thing is, I think people in Washington are looking in the wrong place. Like, he's going to be in Nunavut, Canada. Right?
Why there?
Because no one lives there.
Oh, I see.
You could have a dragon could live there and no one would ever notice. Nunavut is a state, quote unquote, a province of Canada. What do they call them there? Who cares? They're Maple Leafs. But they, if you go up high, on the globe,
way up there
is the last province. Is called Nunavut, N-U-N something Vut, and there's no one there. It's like a population density of 2 or something. So that's where the Yeti would be.
Okay. Well, I'm going up there. I'm going up into northern Canada in a couple of months.
Yeah.
So I'll keep an eye out.
What are you doing there?
Fishing.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's one of those fly-in deals where you land on the water and they leave you in the wilderness for a week.
Good. You're gonna get eaten by a bear. You ever seen Grizzly Man?
No, but I've heard about it. I've got no desire to listen to a man be eaten alive by a bear.
Yeah. It's a good documentary. That guy, well, let's just say he should also be at Slab City.
Yeah.
Because he would have been more at home here. But our friends, our MAPS members, who are all just called Radar and Dish, they're a husband and wife couple.
Okay.
Radar and Dish. They live out here. They've got a nice bungalow with one wall made of like old Coke bottles. It's very nice.
Well, tell them I said hi.
Yeah. One of them is currently working at, well, I almost said it. See, I got to be careful. But anyway, yeah, Yetis and Bigfoots, that's good because that is a nice I hadn't even planned that, but that crosses over perfectly with our discussion of giants.
Beauty.
And the Nephilim, because of a thing that was just given over to me that I'd never heard of before, but, God just disseminates down to make the connection. Because we got to talk about giants today. Because people have been complaining that we tease stuff and then never, ever talk about it again.
Yeah, we're going to do better.
No, we're not. Look, here's the problem. This does not come out in chronological order, people. We're not in normal space. So just because we tease it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It just may not happen for a couple of years, or it may have happened in the future or in the past.
It seems unfair to our audience. Maybe we should try to.
We may tease things. Like, one day I'm going to talk about Rupert Sheldrake. One day. And one day I'm going to talk about the meaninglessness of philosophy. I mean, it's just we're not bound by traditional chronology.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
Which is, and I don't mean flamenco's new chronology. You know about flamenco?
No. What are you talking about?
Flamenco. I may be mispronouncing it as a Russian name.
Okay.
Flamenco. He was this dude. I think, is he still alive? Maybe. Anyway, his work got real popular after the Soviet Union fell and people went insane for a while. He was a mathematician, and he had these other mathematicians, good mathematicians, but, anyway, his whole thing, he developed this theory that every historical thing that had ever happened from like Egypt to now had actually happened during the Middle Ages. And we were just confused on the timeline. Like, Jesus was born in 1733, and the pyramids were built in 1120 or whatever. And there's a 7-volume work of cult classic that these people follow that they...
I have to read this.
It's pretty great. I don't mean that new chronology. I mean, I'm not bound by traditional chronology.
Okay, so we're sort of time travelers. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, everyone travels through time at 60 seconds a minute.
Well, that's true.
Just forward.
Yeah.
All you got to do is go the other way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the thing about time travel. It is possible, right? Because we're doing it right now. We just don't know how to change this. We know how to change the speed, relativity.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So there we got two things. We know how to change the speed. We just don't know how to change the direction. Once we get that, we're golden.
Did you just appeal to relativity? That is such a boomer move on your part.
What now?
Did you just appeal to relativity? I thought relativity was bunk.
No, relativity is real. Relativity is real.
Aren't we past this? I don't know. It's real? Okay, relativity. I can't keep up with the things that we've pitched out the window.
No, relativity is real.
Okay.
Relativity is real. Yeah. But anyway.
So we can talk about giants, bro.
Yeah, Yetis. Because of Zermatism. Zermatism is this thing. I know. I'm going, but this is all going to make sense. Listen.
Okay, like Zermatt, Switzerland.
Like ZERM itism.
Okay.
There was this artist. I think he was born in the very late 1800s, and he died in like 1980. I forget his name.
Mm-hmm.
But he had, for no other reason than he liked the aesthetics of his sculptures, he came up with this whole mythology that all of mankind had come after the flood, the post-deluge world from Easter Island, where we had battled or the sons of Yeti. Right?
Okay.
It's the exact same mythology in the Bible where you have the sons of God came down and had children with the daughters of men, the Nephilim.
Right.
Right. Take sons of God and replace it with sons of Yeti. Okay. And that's Zermatism. And I just thought that was a nice segue.
I don't know where we segued from.
From giants.
Okay.
From Yetis to giants.
Okay, gotcha.
Because the giants go back to the ancient times.
Right.
because the Nephilim are giants. And what are the Nephilim? Well, in the Bible times, in the very beginning of Genesis, it does this throwaway line. It's like, oh yeah, here's creation. Mm-hmm. Here's some flood. Here's some Tower of Babel. Mm-hmm. Now we're going to talk for a long time about Abraham and so on, right? Mm-hmm. And then like 2 verses in there, it goes, and the sons of God came down and had children with the daughters of men. These were the mighty men of renown, and they were giants or whatever. And then it just doesn't tell you anything else.
Yeah, it gets skipped over. It's just
like, oh yeah, you know all. It's like, hey, yeah, and you know about that giants.
Yeah, it was sort of assumed.
The other stuff.
I love it because it assumes we all know what we're talking about. You know.
Yeah, they're like, oh yeah, and yeah, there were some giants. Now on to the, but here's the other thing. What did the Greeks say? The Greeks said there were some gods. Mm-hmm. There were some titans.
Yep.
Right, and the titans were they weren't quite gods, and they often were these gigantic, grotesque figures that walked the earth and often cannibalized people, cyclopses and whatnot. Right, and then the gods had to make war on the titans and get rid of them, and then the heroes had to mop up the rest. Okay. Like the gods did most of it, but some of the giants hid in a cave or whatever, and then they left, and they were like, we did that already. So then Odysseus has to stab one in the eye with a spear, because it's a cyclops or whatever.
This seems very parallel with the great global flood, and then later the conquest of Canaan by Israel.
It's the same story, right? It's the same. Like the Norse people have the frost giants. Like Thor has to go destroy the frost giants. Everywhere in the world, you've got the gods versus the giants.
Okay.
That's the ancient myth of man.
Okay.
And for our purposes, I'm just going to call them the giants. But if you want to call them the Nephilim, that's fine.
All right.
Okay. Or the frost giants or the titans. I don't whichever.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So the Nephilim, they were this idea that again, it's this idea that somehow something from heaven comes down and makes ungood, bad. Hey! Sorry, one of the vagrants trying to steal my stuff. Everyone here is very nice, but they will walk off with your stuff if you're not looking.
Well, be careful, bro.
It's okay. No one hurts you here. This is it restores your faith in humanity. No one murders anybody, even though there's no police, and you could totally get away with it. Mm-hmm. It is like a game of hide and seek with your stuff, though.
Okay.
It's like it's just like fair game. It's like, ha, gotcha. You weren't looking. And then you're like, well, I guess I can't complain, But you just got to always watch your stuff. Anyway. Okay. Anyway, the giants. Okay, so there's some idea that like the fallen angels. This is all in the Book of Enoch.
Okay.
The Book of Enoch. I realize I'm going a little crazy today, but that's all right.
All right.
Look, the Book of Enoch is an apocryphal book, which means it's not in the canon of Scripture. For some reason, although Jesus does quote from it.
So does Peter?
I think it's Jude. Maybe it's Peter.
One of them, yeah. I know what you're talking about.
The New Testament writers and the New Testament figures, including some pretty important ones like Jesus, they quote from this book and talk about it as though it is valid. Mm-hmm. And also Proverbs sort of brings it up in a weird way. And the Book of Wisdom, which is another apocryphal book, unless you're Catholic/Orthodox, which it counts it in the canon and puts it in the Bible. Which is also supposedly written by Solomon, just does it verbatim. It's just like pull straight from the Book of Enoch about all this stuff. And the Book of Enoch tells how some of the angels, so you got some of the angels who follow Satan, and they just go down. And there's other angels that are like, I don't know about that. I'm not into that. But then when God makes women, they're like, those are quite lovely.
Mm-hmm. Right? It's true.
It's true.
Yeah.
And it's something about it's something about they want to also be incarnate. Mm-hmm. They know that God's going to be incarnate is this sort of idea. Mm-hmm. It's sort of like a twisted, it's a twisted desire born out of love of God. Mm-hmm. Like God's going to be incarnate, and they're like, well, we want to be like God, so let's be incarnate too. But we can't do that, but we could have children that are, right? It's sort of that thread is in there, right?
Right, yeah.
Okay, so anyway, they go down, and they make this deal that they'll do this thing, even though they know it'll be really bad for them.
Mm-hmm.
And the angels basically make a pact in the Book of Enoch. They're going to go to do this thing. They're not going to back out. And I think, don't quote me on this one. I think one of them does back out just before. It's like the guy's like, we're all going to jump in the pool on 5, ready? And then one guy's like, he didn't do it. And everyone looks up at him from the water like, you, come on.
Yeah.
You were supposed to jump in the ice water too. Now we're all going to be punished by God and you're fine, jerk. He's like, sorry. Anyway, but they all go down and they I don't know how angels have sex, but anyway, they reproduce, and their offspring are these giant grotesqueries.
Mm-hmm.
Very similar to the idea of the Titan story in the Greek mythology and the Norse mythology and also some of the Native American mythology. Okay. So anyway, they're always not quite right. They're always they're like they're bigger, right? Bigger people, but they're always like they've almost always got extra digits, usually 6, which is one of the reasons 6 is symbolic of evil.
Oh,
right. Because they'll have 6 fingers on the hand, 6 toes on the foot, and there's tons of statues. Look up 6-finger statues. That's your mystical homework today. 6-finger ancient statues. They all over the world. You pull out these idols and these things, and they've got 6 fingers. It's very strange.
Whoa.
Or maybe they have one eye. I don't know. Maybe they're cyclopses. Who knows? But they're very evil, and they eventually end up turning on the people that they are with and ruling over, and they start cannibalizing and all this stuff. Right. And the sons of God who come down, in exchange for procreation with man, they provide services.
Okay.
Services. It's the original like angelic whoring, right? Sort of. They teach people how to do blacksmithery, how to make weapons. They teach them herbs. They teach them medicine. They teach them various things that ancient peoples would like to know, like how to make pots and weave baskets. And they also teach the women in the Book of Enoch. They teach them how to do makeup. That's right in there too. It's a bit strange, like weapons of war, medicine, and makeup. That was the 2 gifts from the fallen angels.
Okay.
Right. And they teach them how to do sorcery, the magic arts, all this stuff. Okay. So this is sort of like the myth of how people come into technology. Like people are like, hey, we don't seem to be like the animals, right? We've got all this stuff we do. Where'd that come from?
Right.
It's the classic myth. And I use myth not saying it's not true. I use myth just saying it's the Promethean myth. Prometheus comes down, he gives men fire. The other gods do not like this, and Prometheus has to be punished, right? Lucifer also being light bringer, right? Same idea. Like he's the serpent, he's giving the knowledge. Right. This idea that the fallen angels provide the knowledge, and then God gets mad at it. And you're like, why would God get mad at knowledge? Well, maybe it wasn't knowledge we're really ready yet for. Like it'd be like if someone comes into your house and they teach your 3-year-old about sex.
Yeah. Would not appreciate that.
That's not really knowledge that you want them to have right now. Or they teach them how to like make a gun. Which is what the angels did. They're like, hey guys, have some weaponry. And God's like, why did you give them the weaponry? Now they're just it's gonna be awful.
Now, in some prior or future episode, we discussed the Manhattan Project, and there was a weird dude that would show up and give them hints.
Yes, I believe that's in the future. We discussed that.
That keeps popping into my mind.
Yeah.
As we talk about this.
So that's the crypto context for the flood.
Okay.
Okay, because when it's like the iniquity of the humans was so great that God gets implied in that is all this Nephilim stuff.
Okay.
And the giants corrupting the world and all the fallen angels, right? It's gotten so bad that God's just like, I just have to flood it. Now, this isn't made very explicit in the Bible, except for that little throwaway line about the Nephilim.
Mm-hmm.
However, the later biblical story is about clearing out the remains. Like, God got most of them, but somehow some of them survived. Mm-hmm. That's another topic. And that they now live in Canaan, right? There's giants in Canaan. Mm-hmm. And they're in the promised land. They have to drive them out. Even after they do that, there's still a couple sticking around later, like Goliath, you know?
Yeah.
And Goliath's brother in Bible has 6 fingers. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't say Goliath does, but his brother does. So there's still some Nephilimish DNA running around. And full disclosure, I sometimes worry I may be part Nephilim.
No.
I think a small bit.
I don't think so.
I think a small bit. Though I'm not overly tall. I mean, I'm taller than average, but, you know, I'm not like a giant. So there's this. Now, how do they survive the flood, you might ask? Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to quickly tell you how the flood happened, and then we'll go on to the giants.
Okay.
Here's the explanation of the flood.
Tell us.
There was the Ice Age. Remember the Ice Age? Mm-hmm. We all remember the Ice Age. Mm-hmm. There was ice all over the world. Like, imagine the polar ice caps, and they actually go down into the upper part of the Dakotas.
Okay.
Where they are now.
All right.
Very cold in comparison to today. You can only really live around the equator. The Great Lakes are actually the leftovers of the melted ice there. They're like primordial glacier puddles.
Wow.
The last ice age. Yeah. That's actually me and mainstream science agree on that.
Okay.
But what happened was there was the Younger Dryas, right? And that's the event. That's the timeline where that suddenly melts for some reason. Mm-hmm. And everyone agrees it was very rapid.
Okay.
I just happen to say that it was more rapid than they do. They think it was like over the course of 100 years. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, it was over the course of a day.
Ooh.
Because here's what, and there's some evidence for this, that the most likely scenario is that a meteorite or a comet or something, imagine, just strikes the polar ice caps right on top. Boom.
Okay.
Melts it. Mm-hmm. Okay. Overnight. So it's an impact that it's unfortunate. It doesn't leave a lot of traces because it hits ice, which melts away. Mm-hmm. Right. There are some. There's these micro fragments and everything. And then, so that's the effect of dumping a bucket of water over the top of the Earth's head.
Okay.
Right. And that's the deluge.
Ah.
That's global flood. Because that answers so many questions. One, because in Genesis, it talks about mostly the waters come up from the ground. Mm-hmm. Right? And you're like, well, how could that be? It's like the sea rises up. Mm-hmm. Right. And the rain is actually a secondary thing.
Okay.
And then 2, it's like, well, where'd the water go? Mm-hmm. Right. If the water covered everything, like, well, then where is the water now?
Right.
And it's like, well, it's just in the ocean. It used to be a lot more dry land.
It took 40 days for all that water to go across all the land and settle in the basins of the ocean. Yeah, there used to be a lot more dry land. Like, look up a lovely map exercise is look up the terrain of the Earth during the last ice age when it was covered, when most of the water was locked up in ice. Mm-hmm. And all of the coastline right now, you could walk out several hundred more miles out into what is now the ocean. Wow. Okay.
Right. So where do people build cities? They build them near the coasts. Mm-hmm. Then as now, the most populated cities are along the coastline. So meteor impact on the top of the Earth, that is the whole world being flooded, right? Everyone's like, oh no. But it also explains like, okay, well, how did Noah get like wildebeests? Mm-hmm. You know, it's like, well, he didn't have to probably, because if you look at the altitude of all of the places, it gets you a map of the altitude of the Earth and a map of the locations of megafauna, mm-hmm. large animals. It's a 1-to-1 overlap. The African Serengeti is very high up in the air.
Oh.
As is the Asian jungles where the orangutans live and the tigers, as is the American places where you're still got your grizzly bears and your wolves and stuff and your moose. So that's quite a coincidence. All the places where you have these megafauna are at high altitude because the megafauna were largely washed away, unfortunately, as a side effect of killing the giants.
Right.
Which is always a side effect of killing the giants, is you have to kill some big moose. But so anyway, that's how it happened. And then some of them survived somehow, like in the Promised Land in Goliath. And maybe up in the high north where some guy named Thor, who later has legends written about him, has to go kill or whatever. And they're these giants. And what are the giants? They are they're big. Now the giants degrade with time. Like that's clear in the text too, and in the myths. Like they start out the first titans, very big, very scary. Okay. But as they intermingle with people, the DNA gets degraded and they become a little smaller. Still big and scary, still mean, but not quite as bad. And then when you get down to Goliath, it's like, oh, I'm just a 9 foot tall dude with 6 fingers. Gotcha. Or with a brother that has 6 fingers, right? Okay. I'm still big. I'm still scary. Like no one wants to box me, right? Because I'm a giant. But I'm not like a 15-foot cyclops, with magic powers or whatever. Okay. So one of the places, now here's the thing, America is the land of giants. And this is the weirdness of America, is that in the 1800s, so people are going around settling America, right? There are, which you don't find any traces of today unless you go look up the microfiche, as I have done. And as the lovely gentleman who has written this book that I'm going to go through with has done, it's called The Ancient Giants Who Ruled America let me look up this guy's name here, by Richard J. Dewhurst. The Ancient Giants Who Ruled America, The Missing Skeletons and the Great Smithsonian Cover-Up by Richard J. Dewhurst. Now, I don't know about the Smithsonian cover-up, but this guy has gone through the America's libraries and found all the microfiche, right? Cool. And there are thousands, and I do mean thousands, of newspaper articles all across the country talking about, and so today, while he was plowing his field, uncovered a skull. Big as that fits over your head, the man's head, a femur bone that was 6 foot long, right? And the Native Americans have all these legends of these giant tribes that live with them, right? And everyone's like, whatever. But no, there are report after report after report in the 1800s America about the giants. And I'm going to read a couple of them for you because they're fascinating.
Oh, this is cool.
Okay. So New York was a big place too for giants. Now this is a history of Livingston County. This was an article written in a newspaper in New York in 1824. Let's see. Human bones. I'm going to try to read it like I'm an 1800 newsman. Human bones of gigantic proportion were discovered in such a state of preservation as to be accurately described and measured. The cavities of the skulls were large enough in their dimensions to receive the entire head of a man in modern times, and could be put on one's head with as much ease as a hat or a cap. The jawbones were sufficiently large to admit to be placed so as to match or fit the outside of a modern man's face. Other bones so far discovered appear to be of equal proportion with the skulls and jawbones, several of which have been preserved in the cabinets of antiquarians, where they still may be seen.
Whoa. Okay, what year was this written?
1804.
So sometime between 1804, if assuming that was true, all these artifacts were collected and hidden away somewhere because you can't get that anywhere.
Well, here's another one. There's just pages of these things. It's here's an account from the Ohio Democrat newspaper in 1870. January 14th, 1870, the Ohio Democrat newspaper. A Cardiff giant undone with an enormous iron helmet. On Tuesday morning last, while Mr. William Thompson, assisted by Mr. Robert Smith, was engaged in making an excavation near the house of the former, about a half-mile northwest of Hickory, preparatory to erecting a derrick. I don't know what a derrick is. They exhumed an enormous helmet of iron, which was corroded with rust. Further digging brought to light a sword, which measured 9 foot in length.
Whoa.
Curiosity incited them to enlarge the hole, and after some little time they discovered the bones of 2 enormous feet. Following up the lead, they had so unexpectedly struck, in a few hours' time they had unearthed the well-preserved remains of an enormous giant, belonging to a species of the human family, which probably inhabited this and other parts of the world. At the time in which the Bible speaks when it says, quote, "And there were giants in those days." So, again, there's another account. The guys, they're tilling the land, they're working the land, they're building their derricks and their shanties and their farmhouses, and they just keep running over these giants.
So, okay, hang on a minute. I can go to the grocery store right now and find a newspaper that says, Hillary Clinton gives birth to Bat Boy. So, what? I need a little more than that.
I hear you, and that's the most common. The most common thing is the most common. What would you say? Explanation, mainstream explaining away the giant thing is that it's all just yellow journalism.
Okay.
It's all just fake stories.
Okay.
To that, you have to say, well, one, it's very strange that there are tens of thousands of them. I mean, maybe people were just really into giant stories.
Right.
That's good. It could be. The other thing is that there are a couple of, because this goes on to about the early 1900s.
Okay.
And so there are a couple of very interesting photos that go along with this.
Oh, okay.
There's a few photos of people with these, what look like big bones, right? And there's definitely photos of these museums they claim to be talking about in here, right? Now, is all of it true? Probably not. There's probably some hoaxing in there, right? Because you want to get in on if other people are finding giants, you want to find a giant.
Sure.
And you want to put it in your farm for someone to pay, 2 pence to come see or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's just the fact that there are so many of them, and also there's well, here, let me see now. There's let me see where I marked it. There, when they got to America and they were going through South America, there was a tribe which people encountered, which was enormously tall. And there are photos of regular European people with this tribe of I forget what they are called, but they they're like these 7 foot tall women and these 8 foot tall men together, and it's in black and white, and it's the guy's clearly alive. I mean, they're not like stuffed or hoaxed, people.
Yeah, sure.
And you say, but the people are like, well, this is within the realm of. I mean, we have people that are that tall today, right? That's within the realm. So maybe there's just, but it is weird. You have all these giant stories. The Native Americans have these giant legends, and then they go out to the jungle and they just happen to find a tribe of giant people. Now, 7 and 8 foot tall isn't what we would call giant today.
Right.
Like described in this book is in these microfiche we're talking 9 to 15 foot tall, quite large, but again, so it could just all be like all this stuff. It could just all be a hoax. It could just all be a hoax, except, it fits with so many other things, like all the mythology, the Zermatism, as we discussed earlier. At some point you get so many connections, you start to think, maybe. And we're trying to tell people the original history of America.
I mean, it is like an idea that every human culture has held independently of each other, that there were giants running around.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. It's accepted by everybody that in the past there were big versions of everything. There was a giant sloth. There was a saber-toothed tiger.
Yep.
So why not giant people?
Good question. Why not giant people?
There was a giant version in science. There's a giant version of every animal. There's a giant bear. That's like, I saw a replica of one based on a skeleton, and it's like 20 foot tall.
Yikes!
Right? There's giant sharks. There's giant turtles. If you go to any natural history museum, they'll give you all these giant bones of every animal you can imagine, except for people. Why not people? Right? Humans are always somehow magically excluded from natural history as ever having changed, you know? So the whole giant thing, it makes more natural sense to me. I'll read you a couple more. Okay, this is from Petersburg, Kentucky, in the Daily Northwestern, Oshkosh, Wisconsin. So this is the newspapers in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, but the finding was in Kentucky.
Okay.
July 8, 1886. Petersburg, Kentucky, 25 miles below here. An excavation for a new building has brought to light a peculiar find. It being a strange-looking Indian grave, the receptacle of which has been made of stone and clay, formed into a kind of cement about 3 feet in height and fully 9 feet in length. Within the rude vault lay a giant human skeleton that measured 7 foot 2 inches in length. Now, again, that's not very big. I mean, it is big if you ran into a 7 foot tall 2 inch guy, but it's not like giant.
Gotcha.
The bones were all of large proportions, and the monstrous skull, with teeth perfect intact, was more than half an inch thick at the base. A number of copper pieces, evidently worn for ornaments, a stone pipe, and a quantity of arrowheads were found with the decaying bones. So it could just be that Native Americans tended to be overly tall, right? I grant that. That could be what it is, except that some of these skulls have like double rows of teeth and stuff.
Ooh.
They bear the... See, the Native Americans also have the 6-finger thing. Like, that's the thing. Like, why? How did they get the 6-finger thing? Right? Like, the Babylonians have the grotesqueries, the Titans with the 6 fingers. And the Native Americans are like, oh, yeah, we had big things with 6 fingers, too.
Right.
It's like, why the 6-finger thing? Unless there were actually people running around with the 6 fingers. And, you know, some people, I think it's not uncommon. I think it's like 1 in every 200 people is born with a 6-digit today, and they just usually amputate it at birth. But so maybe, you know, if you want to be skeptical about it, maybe just the Native Americans had a higher incidence of 6 digits, and they just didn't cut them off, and they were somewhat useful.
You know, come to think of it,
But at some point, when you start making all these admissions, like, oh yeah, they just had 6 fingers, and they were also just big, then you're just saying, oh yeah, well, you're right. You know, that's the thing. When you start saying like, well, they were just bigger than average, and they had 6 digits. It's like, well, that's what I was saying to begin with.
Okay, so part of the problem is if you want to prove something never existed that did, you change the definition of the thing into something so fantastical that nothing meets the criteria. Right. That's I think magic probably falls into that category too.
Yeah, I mean, one of these days I'm going to have on my friend Black Pope.
Okay.
He's not black as in African American. He's black as in a necromancer.
Okay.
And he's going to talk to us about magic. He's a great magician, and I use that term as in good at magic, not morally great.
Okay, so he's an evil person.
Nah, let's call him chaotic neutral.
Chaotic neutral. Okay.
Chaotic neutral. He's a little insane.
All right,
but I don't know that he comes out to Slab City. He may be a snowbird, but he's definitely with the mole people in New York from time to time. Let's just put it that way.
Okay, I'm writing Black Pope down on our teased list.
Yeah, Black Pope. He'll come on, and I'll do it. It may have to be a sort of a special kind of interview, because he's one of those guys where you talk to him, you're like, well, tell me about your tarot card readings, and then he's like, okay, and then he'll do like 2 lines and then the lesser key of Solomon says that we, you know, it's like it goes off. So you gotta sort of wrangle him about. Okay, but he's a good guy. He's a good guy. He's definitely a patriot. Just a patriot that dabbles in necromancy. Who hasn't? So now here's one from an army general. This was in his diary entry in 1792. This is earlier. General John Payne. No relation, to my knowledge, to Thomas Paine. He records uncovering an ancient burial ground along the banks. He says, the bottom, he's talking about a mound here, and he says, the bottom of which, in his diary, Augusta, is situated a large burying ground of the ancients. They have been found in great number and of all sizes. From the cellar under my dwelling, over 110 skeletons were taken. So this guy has a problem.
Yeah.
I measured them by skulls, and there might have been more whose skulls had crumbled to dust. The skeletons were in all sizes, from 7 foot tall to infant. Dave Kilgore, who was a tall and very large man, passed our village at the time I was excavating my cellar, and we took him down and applied a thigh bone to his. The man, if well proportioned, must have been 10 to 12 inches taller than Kilgore. The lower jawbone would slip over his skin and all. So you get not only this idea that they were taller, but also girthier.
Right.
Like sizable. Like a lot of these giants, you get this idea they're just like tall and spindly.
Yeah.
These are like tall NFL linebackers.
Right on.
Very big, stocky people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why General Paine has so many skeletons in his basement. That's a bit suspicious.
Well, he said he was excavating his basement. Maybe he was building one.
Yeah.
And uncovered them.
I don't know. It's like, oh, yeah, all these skeletons, they must have been an Indian burial ground here.
Right. Well, I think it was a thing to build yourself I think they would build themselves a house and then saying, man, I need a root cellar. And so they just dig one under the house.
Yeah. There's a lot of bones that they found in Ben Franklin's house after the fact.
Yeah, I've read about that. It's pretty creepy.
Ben Franklin he belonged to this group called the Hellfire Club, where they had orgies and stuff.
Yeah.
And, he was a Freemason.
I get the impression that he was a very bad dude.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not a big fan of He also wrote a scientific paper in a journal called On the Praise of Flatulence.
That sounds like him.
Or is On the Praise of Flatulence or On the Glory of Farting. I don't remember the title.
Mm-hmm.
One of the two.
Mm-hmm.
But in it, he extols people to just his quote is, let the wind blow as it will. That's Ben Franklin, the founding father's advice to people. He also wrote a letter called to a young man, an advice to a young man on choosing a mistress, in which he first says, to his credit, I don't recommend you do adultery.
Mm-hmm.
So credit to Ben Franklin. But then he says, but if thou must, he says, I recommend you choose an older woman because she won't get pregnant. Mm-hmm. And she knows how to please a man. She's learned how to please men by now. Ben Franklin's take was, young women, they're beautiful, but they don't know what they're doing. He says that in not so many words, because he had said, when we sent him to France as an ambassador, all he did over there was just bugger around with all the French ladies, and I do mean bugger around, but because they're French and he was Ben Franklin.
Yikes!
But so he recommended old women both for their infertility and experience. But yeah, so this there's just, it goes on, and they find now you say where did all the skeletons go? Now there is a convenient explanation for this.
Okay.
That is actually so convenient. It's like, But anyway, in the 73, 63, there was the Native American Preservation and Repatriation Act. Okay. Mm-hmm. Which is still in effect today, which basically means that all things that may be assumed to be Native American remains have to be returned to the Native American tribes.
Oh. Anything
in public hands. Now, in private hands is a different matter. And I am told by my friends here in Slab City, who, with a grain of salt, because they will also tell you that last night they were caught up by a light in the sky from the Palladians or whatever.
Okay.
But I am told there are still places in America where private hands have these bones that you can see if you know the right connections.
Ooh.
But all the public Native American remains that we had to be given over to the to the Native American tribes to do what they would with them, usually reburial or whatever. Now, this was despite a lengthy battle that took place. Now, this guy, I've got him right here. This fella, it was called NAGPRA, the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, one of the guys at the forefront of this was this guy named Don Dixon, who had one of these museums where he was tilling his ground for his farm. He's like, oh man, look at all these skeletons. I'm going to build a little museum about the mound builders' tombs here. And there's a little picture in this book of him standing in front of his museum. It says Museum of Mound Builders' Tombs on it. And I'm going to put him in there. People are going to come pay to see my collection of Native American remains or Indian remains. Mm-hmm. And so this museum was shut down. This museum was eventually handed over to the state after he died. I think it was in Illinois, right? And then there was NAGPRA, the Native American Repatriation Act, put an end to this because in 1990 they sued that this museum be shut down and that all the skeletons should be reburied according to Native American custom. Now, we had DNA at this time, and despite the fact that the DNA to the Native Americans had no relation to the DNA of these remains, mm-hmm. it was still just assumed, well, they must be Indians. And so they were given back, and all of the bones were done with whatever the Native American tribes did with them.
I think
presumably reburied them, maybe use them for, whatever they do.
There's a side lesson here that you should never will anything of value to the government. They will not take care of it.
They will not take care of it.
They will give it to Indians.
Right. So it's not that there was like a cover up per se. It's that any sort of thing that was deemed to be of times before the settlers got here mm-hmm. was just said, well, any of that we have that the remains has to be given back to the tribes.
Right.
And so now what do the tribes have? What do they do with it? Who knows? Mm-hmm. Which I should probably go talk to the Navajo here and ask them.
Okay.
But so that would be, now that's like why the skeletons aren't available anymore. People say that in South America there are still some that are in public hands. And there are some that are larger than normal. I don't know that I would classify them as giant. They're not Nephilim size. Like I would say you're getting Nephilim territory when you're like a 12, 15 foot tall guy. Mm-hmm. And this is like bones of like a 9 foot tall person, mm-hmm. which we have pictures. Robert Wadlow, the American, who was, when he was 21, he was 9'4". Mm-hmm. And then he died because he was 9'4", and his heart was like, I can't do it anymore. Yeah. He had giganticism. So, that's within the normal range. Mm-hmm. So the giant thing, America was full of giants, according to these reports, according to thousands of newspaper articles from the 1800s, Native American legend, Babylonian legend. There's this idea that these some sort of something, some other race of humans that was bigger than average, ruled over the others and did bad things, usually cannibalism, that sort of stuff, waged a lot of war, and that heroes over time, assisted by a global flood, mm-hmm. had to get rid of them. Okay. Now, the great question, Smokestack.
What is it?
Are any of these giants alive today? Are any of these giants alive today?
I was about to ask.
And now I am going to, here, let me get my tinfoil hat back on.
Okay.
Because as I mentioned in a future or past episode, I don't remember. Mm-hmm. This didn't happen. It's so ridiculous. But maybe it did.
Okay.
That's my position on everything is maybe.
Maybe, right? But probably not. Okay.
But probably not. In the year two, so after the U.S. went to Afghanistan, mm-hmm. We had a sad incident.
Yeah.
A group of our special forces was speared to death by a giant from a cave.
That didn't make the news.
It didn't make the news, but honestly, would it? Would it make the news?
Probably not.
Exactly. I mean, if there was a giant found, it would throw off so much stuff. I used to not put stock in this whole they don't tell people because of panic. But after looking at how much people panic over like things that don't even happen, that they just think, it's like, oh, they're actually right to do that.
Yeah.
Like if an alien came down and talked to the president, they'd be like, don't tell anybody because everyone will freak out. So yeah, you're probably right. Anyway, I believe we have a clip of this.
Yes, we do.
Now let's give credit to the name of the guy that did this interview. He's the YouTuber there.
That would be L.A. Marzulli.
L.A. Marzulli.
Put up a link to the original video.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He does all of his stuff from a strictly like biblical prophecy hunter guy. Like he's running around looking for evidence of like, I don't know, Moses's tooth or something.
Yeah.
But he's talking with these people who claim to have been in the American military, who claim to have shot and killed the giant.
Mm-hmm.
Now the thing is, as he goes into here, he's correct about this. One guy came forward with this story, and he was like, whatever. And I think it may have been on George Nowhere's Coast to Coast show. Okay. I don't remember. And then another guy sometime later comes forward with an identical story who doesn't know about the first one. And that's when people started going, And then there was a third guy. But anyway, we're going to listen to the account from one guy who talks about, so I'll set the scene for you, a recon group in Afghanistan looking for Taliban or whatever they were at that point are out there and they disappear. They disappear. And then so another group is sent to go find them. And that's what this guy is talking about, his testimony. Let's play the clip.
So we flew in. To about 4 kilometers. We're hiking through the same area where they were supposed to make one of their checkpoints, one of their rally points. And before we left, there was all kinds of what happened with the ambush, but that was even odd because at point of ambush, you would call for maybe close air support, something, okay? There was no calls made, just off the bridge. So we're coming down a mountainside, and it was a nice path, goat path. As we bent around this corner, you could see this opening of the cave. There's a cave as we're coming around. And then I see there's a lot of rocks, which is another oddity, and then bone matter. When I'm not close enough to identify what kind of bones, but I did see something I knew was a piece of our communications equipment. So instantly, we're thinking ambush, maybe animal, could be anything. And there was enough room in front of this cave, but it had a sheer drop-off. But there was enough room that we actually got into a decent dispersal in case of ambush.
You see something coming out of the cave, and it's moving with a speed and agility that catches you off guard. Everybody.
And he comes out. It was a man at least 12 to 15 feet. This is a monster. Red beard, then his hair was long past the shoulder, a scarlet red, and Dan runs at him and starts shooting, which broke all of us into the reality. Because it was so surreal.
Now your training is kicking in.
Oh yeah, okay. Muscle memory, complete muscle memory. While Dan is moving at him, another bro of mine's laying down fire, and I start firing. He skewers Dan. He's now got him on this pike. We went to him. And he's still got him, and he's coming after more. We all just clicked in. I don't know what it was, but I remember we're all like, shoot him in the face, shoot him in the face. And our weapons components were in force. We had 308s, and we had Barrett 50s. This is sounding longer than it took. We're talking 30 seconds. And he's taking multiple hits, and is still moving.
I love the sound effects.
Oh, yeah.
First of all, when he's just talking, there's like an eagle.
I'm gonna try to do the giant noise. Okay, you ready?
Uh-huh. I love thinking about Mazzulli just in his in his studio after he records this, trying to make giant noises. Just, trying to get it right,
It's difficult. I mean, it was like gargling and growling at the same time.
There's a lot of racism against red-haired people in giant stories. They're all these red-haired cannibals. I don't know why they got to have red hair. But the giants having red hair goes back to the Neolithic times.
I don't want to out you, but you sound a little sensitive about it.
I know. That's why, again, I'm half Nephilim. I don't have the full thing, but I just have a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah,
does that qualify you for a college scholarship?
I did put down Nephilim on my.
Is your minority status?
That's what I self-identify as.
Okay.
But so that obviously didn't happen.
We can set up the United Nephilim College Fund.
Yeah. That guy obviously did not shoot a giant in the face with a fire team in 2002 and bring down a 15-foot, six-fingered guy that had just speared one of his compatriots, right? Except that maybe it did.
Maybe.
I don't. Here's the thing: you have to postulate, if that's true, that the Nephilim, there's still a breeding population of Nephilim out there somewhere, like living in a cave, or that they're immortal,
right?
And they don't age.
Oh.
And so that one's just been out there since biblical times. He survived the flood.
Yeah.
He survived the hunting down of him by the Israelites. He survived Thor coming after them. He hasn't been killed by Odysseus. All of the intervening years, he's managed to get food, only to get killed by this dummy when he runs out in a manic rage to just try and spear everybody.
And it took a machine gun to the face, apparently, to bring him down.
A whole squad of machine gun to the face.
Yeah.
So, look, as part of our map service, this is how you fight if you ever find yourself in conflict with a giant, you got to aim for the face. Mm-hmm. We have anecdotal evidence that's how you do it, because the body's just too thick.
Yep.
And B, you need a machine gun. And C, you need 5 other guys with a machine gun.
Okay, 5 machine guns to the face will take down giant. Check.
We'll take down a modern Nephilim.
That can be our people skill for this episode.
He goes on to talk about, there's all these, the other guys say, they're like, how big was he? Well, he was, probably 13 foot tall. And they're like, how much do you weigh? We estimated probably 1,100 pounds. He's a big dude.
Yeah, very
large. If there was an 1,100 pound, 13 foot dude, that would be insanely scary.
Yeah.
And I just love that clip because it's so ridiculous. But so yes, giants. The problem with the giants is, okay, so I'll relay out the case for you because we've covered a lot of ground so far. There are giants of every species accepted by science except for people in the past.
Valid.
Why not people?
Yeah, good question.
Why not people?
Good question.
Every mythology in the world tells of the giants, which are almost always some variant of angels or gods came down, intermingled with people, and produced these things.
Right.
Okay. There's a disturbing amount of coincidence and overlap between the 6-fingered and disfigurement, usually the 6 digits thing, between peoples as far away as ancient Babylonia and the ancient Native Americans. Okay. 4, the 1800s are full of thousands and thousands and thousands of these newspaper articles of people seeing these giants. Okay. These giant skeletons, uncovering the skeletons. All right. And then 5, there are pictures of people with overly tall Native Americans when they first got here and had the cameras. Down in South America, running around the jungles, there's this tribe of 7-foot tall people. Okay. Right. So we have a constellation of things that point towards something. It points towards something. What that is, I don't know, but I don't want to become giant hunters. I'm not here to kill the Nephilim. We're not here hunting them down. If you're out there and you're listening, you're like, I'm going to go find the last Nephilim in Kandahar. No.
It's probably a bad idea.
A, it's probably a bad idea. He's probably going to spear you, as we just learned. And B, we don't – look, killing the last couple of Nephilim, that's in God's hands.
Yeah.
We've got most of them now, Joshua and the chosen people took out the majority of them. Thor got the ones that were still living up north. Odysseus killed that one Cyclops in the Odyssey.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to. We've gotten most of them now. They're not a threat anymore. We don't have to take them out. I want to end all this giant prejudice, that's just all over the world. I mean, the giants have just been slaughtered for thousands of years, indiscriminately, and now people. So none of our listeners should go out and hunt giants, except with a camera. Maybe if you could take a picture of them, you could shoot them that way, but not with a gun.
Okay,
not with a gun. But that's giants. That's giants. The ever-present mystery.
I would like to further explore at some point the connection between giants and magic. And whenever we do that, I'm going to go back and read History of the Kings of Britain, because I think Merlin was reputed to be quite tall.
Yeah, he was. That's the thing. And that's why I brought up the Zermatism earlier with the Bigfoot thing and the sons, because his mythology, which was a recent 20th century mythology, they got, for some reason, if you make up anything, people will follow it. But his was it's the same story, except instead of the sons of God coming down, it's the sons of Yeti, and everyone's like a half Yeti, half human giant, right? And he had some cool sculptures, by the way, that he made of this.
I'll check that out.
But anyway, there's something, even if it's not literally true, which I do believe in the literal existence of giants in the past, but even if it's not literally true, it is psychologically something that the psyche produces that is meaningful, because there's this the human brain has produced this mythology of magical giants that terrorized us for forever.
Yep.
So what is that saying? What does that mean?
Yeah.
And I don't know, but Merlin was quite tall. Merlin also aged backwards.
Really? I don't remember reading that one. That must have been some later.
Yeah. Well, he lived backwards. I don't know if age backwards was the right time, but he experienced time backwards, which is a very complex thought for a medieval mind to come up with. But in the original Arthurian legends, Merlin experiences life backwards. Now, I have trouble even conceiving of that, but Merlin is born when Arthur dies and dies when Arthur is born, and he experiences the end of his life as first and the beginning of his life as last, and he goes backwards.
How weird.
Yeah. Well, that's the sort of stuff I get why you have to be sort of prejudiced against the giants, because they're living their lives backwards. They got their red hair. They're stabbing your. But look, we're gonna make peace with the giants. We need to wrap them up in the affirmative actions. Anyone with red hair and
you're just trying to get reparations for red-haired people. I know what's going on here. You freeloader.
I'm just saying, my people have been hunted down for ages.
Now the truth comes out about this segment.
Hey!
They going after your stuff again?
Well, this guy just has his Rottweilers out there. Weird. His Rottweiler keeps trying to eat my hungry man meal I got cooking over there, which I can't blame the Rottweiler.
Right.
It smells delicious.
I bet.
But they get. Okay. I'll share some with him. I don't mind. I have plenty. I'm not stingy.
Are you negotiating a deal, a bum deal in the desert during our show?
A little bit. I mean, I don't know how your experience with bums, but bums have a sort of sign language, because bums don't like to get near each other, because bums know that each other is dangerous and a little crazy, right? So you don't want to hey, fellow bum, because you might get stabbed when you're not looking. So they communicate at a distance. And they also don't like to speak, really, because if you speak to a bum, it can be perceived as threatening unless you have your voice just right.
Okay.
And vice versa. Like homeless people get very paranoid about physical violence.
Sure.
Not unjustly.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of like communicating with the hands and like pointing at things. This may also be because they're schizophrenic and they just, they hear voices all the time. And so, but Slab City's great. You should all come visit. It's free. Anyone can drive out here and just set up a tent or a house. You can look, if you drive up to Slab City with a trailer full of timber, you can just build a house and no one's going to stop you.
It's really
a libertarian dream.
Both with California and New York, it's amazing what is supposed to be allowed there and what is supposed to be prohibited. You know what I mean? You can't have a big gulp, but you can live in a abandoned subway tunnel. Right. As long as you're not drinking more than 32 ounces of Coke at one time. Right.
It's just because there's no one here to stop you, really. Right. Because this is so far out in the desert. I mean, the nearest town, quote unquote, is like 6 miles away. They have a Walmart. So that's something.
Well, that supports my idea that the large cities and the other areas of the country are turning into two different kingdoms, and we're going back to kind of a city-state model. And the power of the city-state extends itself upon the countryside primarily through the internet. Agree.
Now, the other thing about Slab City that preserves it a little bit from the excesses of modernity is that it is right next to I think it's Air Force bombing test range.
Okay.
So fortunately, we haven't had any of that while we're recording. So there's been no giant. But you can just be sitting out here. It'll be like 3 a.m. It's hard to get your sleep. And boom, like right over there. If they miss, we're all dead. If they're slightly off target, there's going to be like 2,000 people just incinerated.
There's that many people there?
Yeah, because it's still the winter time. Gotcha. I mean, it's starting to warm up a bit, but people come down. They live. Let's say in Oregon, or a lot of people in their caravans like to go up north for the summer where it's colder. But then you don't want to live up there in the winter, when you're just living out of a car. So they drive down here, live at Slab City for the while, and then, like I say, our friends Radar and Dish live here permanently.
Do people grow food out there, or is it too arid?
Oh, yeah. No, Radar and Dish have these raised garden beds, and they're growing, I don't know what they're growing, turnips maybe, pumpkin seeds, perennials, whatever it is they need. They have 2 dogs, and no kids, though. I don't think this would be a good environment to raise children in.
Doesn't sound like it.
What you do is you have your people, right, and then there's progressions. There's progressive levels of menacing. So the way a vagrant encampment inevitably turns out is in concentric rings like Dante's hell, right? Of like crazy.
Okay.
So like the most crazy people live on the outskirts, and then as you go step in, and then so let's say you're level 5 crazy. You don't want to deal with level 7 crazy, but you can communicate with level 6.
Okay.
And so level 6, you'll be like, hey, you stay between me and level 7. And that's how it works all the way down till you get to the middle. And there's one sane guy just ruling over this cloud of schizophrenia like a small king.
Awesome.
And he lives in the middle, and his name is Terrence. And he's in the middle of Slab City right now. He's a great guy. He just likes the computer program. He looks at a lot of pornography, I think, and he does a lot of coding. And he's the sort of guy. He's not insane. He just wants to live in the middle of the desert and do his thing and be sort of semi-revered, worshipped by a cloud of migrating vagrants.
So to speak with Terrence, you have to fight your way through the outer layers of very crazy people.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like a wall, but it's just like where people park their car and put their tent.
Okay.
Like the most, as you go towards the center, people get more normal.
Oh, okay.
Right, because they've pushed out the people that have trouble going to the bathroom in the right place.
Yeah.
They live on the side.
They're level 5, 6, 7, and so forth.
Level 5, 6, 7. The people that's more of a level 4 here.
Okay.
The people that use other people as bathrooms are level 7s.
Okay.
They're on the side. But here if you just like occasionally mess your pants, you're on level 4.
Okay.
Around this place. Okay. But if you go further in, I think Terrence even has a flushable toilet.
Wow.
That he's built himself. So
he'll be the last one to get coronavirus.
He will. He will. But yeah, so Slab City, I recommend it. Everyone should come out here and hang out. Look, if you get homeless for a little while, if you just want a vacation you don't have to pay anything, if you want to watch some bombs fall and hopefully not fall on you, if you want to talk to the heartland of America, the real salt of the earth people, you just come on out to Slab City. I think, what county is this in? Is it called Imperial County? I don't remember. You can find it. It's out here, but they used to have a website, but it went down because,
yeah,
there was a brief movement in the peak hipster time when the hipsters tried to, like the late 2000s, early 2000s, when the hipsters tried to take over Slab City and like live out here and make it trendy, with their hoop earrings and their craft beer and stuff, but. The hipsters who like to live action role play as homeless people,
right?
We're not prepared for the actual homeless people, and the actual homeless people just sort of scared them away. It wasn't, So
hipsters don't thrive outside of their aquariums where they were bred.
No, and this is no hipster hate. Look, I wear flannel sometimes. Yeah, I'm. No hipster hate.
I mean, if I'm chopping firewood, that's
I wear flannel just because.
It's all about the proper use of flannel.
Look, the flannel is sort of the native dress of my people. To be honest, there've been, but yeah. So I believe we have to do a shorter show today.
We got about half hour, I think.
Okay, good. Yeah. Okay, so in that time, I wanted to get the Giants out because our fussy listeners, are all like, "Hey, talk about what you said you were going to talk about."
They're so needy.
They're so needy. Look, you know what? I'm just going to start saying we're going to talk about stuff, and then I'm going to explain nuclear fission on the next show. I'm not, but now see, someone's going to be thinking about it. They're going to cut it off. Let's talk about the meaning of monsters, because this coronavirus, it's probably not going to be a big deal, guys. It's probably going to be fine. But it does bring up some things. I was thinking about the Giants. I had monsters on the brain this weekend, and I got to think about the meaning of monsters. And the Giants are one kind of monster, and the coronavirus is another kind of monster. And there's a third kind of monster too. But all monsters can be put in three categories, and this is a very this will help you understand mythology. Okay, so what was the coronavirus supposed to be? It still may kill everybody. I don't think that it will, but it's still sort of puttering around. I suppose the only thing that could happen is if it mutates and turns into something worse. But I think it's going to be fine. But anyway, what was the coronavirus supposed to be according to Conspiracy Web? You remember?
It was like airborne AIDS.
Yeah. The idea was that it was like half coronavirus, that the Chinese had gone in with their menacing little Chinese fingers, and they put in some HIV genetics into the coronavirus.
Well, that's interesting because a paper came out early on, and then everybody pooped all over it, and they retracted it, and then somebody else published a paper saying basically the same thing, and that one is passed. I think has not been pooped on. So
right.
There may be some truth if it's, there may be some truth to the AIDS similarities.
I don't doubt that the Chinese Communist Party has been trying to put AIDS in everything.
Yeah.
No doubt at all.
Okay.
But it just, but my point is not whether or not that's true. It is that the idea of it is the perfect encapsulation of the modern, it's the modern resurgence of the chimera.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? Because we're getting to a place where the modern world is going to start rebirthing the ancient mythological.
Agree.
Right? Because all this genetic testing we do, and I know I poo-poo genetics, and I still poo-poo genetics, but you can do things that you think are genetic that are actually doing something else that are still successful. Yep. Your mechanism but anyway, so you got three monster types: chimera, amorphous, and then the twisted/inverted. all monsters pretty much can fall into those three categories. All right, so what's a chimera? A chimera is two or more things that don't belong together being brought into unison.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you have like maybe you're a griffin,
Mm-hmm.
I'm half lion, I'm half eagle, maybe I'm a centaur,
Yep.
right? Maybe I'm a minotaur,
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'm a satyr.
Mm-hmm.
And these things are always at war with people. Like all the Greek busts are like them fighting the centaurs or
Mm-hmm.
fighting the minotaurs. Now, in the ancient Egypt days, when people were still more barbaric, they would worship the chimeras, like the Anubis, jackal head,
Yep.
human body, eagle
Mm-hmm.
head. The Greeks were the first ones to be like, no, these are bad. And that's why the Greeks were great. And all their busts are them fighting the chimeras. Whereas before that, they were all worshiping the chimeras.
Right.
Right. And that's why the ancient Greeks were heroic. But so the chimera is this idea that these two things that shouldn't be together have been turned into a unity. Or these two things that should be separate should be turned into a unity.
Mm-hmm.
It's the definition of unholy.
Mm-hmm.
Because holiness means separate.
Yep.
It also means whole,
Yep.
like WHOLE.
Mm-hmm.
But and I'm going to use the chimera to explain to you Deuteronomy purity laws.
Okay.
Okay. Because people are like, this was a big thing back when the new atheist movement was happening and Richard Dawkins was doing his dumb spiel.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, oh, you mixed the wool and the linen. God is mad. You have woven two separate fabrics together and eaten a shellfish. And, here's what that's about, though. Dickie. Okay. Is that the name Yahweh in the Bible means something similar to, a rough translation is him who differences or he who discriminates.
I thought it meant I am what I am, or I am that I am.
No, that's a different name. That's one of the different names of God. Like when Moses says who sent me,
mm-hmm.
he doesn't say Yahweh, he says I am. He gives him a separate name. Okay. It means something like him who makes different, him who separates, something like that.
Okay.
Okay. Where does he get that idea? Well, in the creation narrative, what do you have? You've got the land. He separates the waters from the waters to make dry land.
Mm-hmm.
He separates the night from the day.
Mm-hmm.
He separates the heavens from the earth. He separates the animals from the plants. He separates the crawling things from the things in the sea. He separates the birds of the air. So it's this. So you start with this. Creatio ex nihilo, though I am a fan of it, is not technically in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Like creation out of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
In Genesis, it talks about rather. I'm not even sure how that doctrine came to be because it's not really in the scripture. Like I'm okay with it,
mm-hmm.
but you don't find textual evidence for it. You see, God's there and he's hovering over the waters.
Right.
He's hovering over the waters, and then he begins dividing the waters apart and dividing things. He pulls out one from the other to make creation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's how the creation narrative. That's where the idea of him who differences comes.
Okay.
Because he takes what's there. The water is symbolic of primordial chaos, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then God is separating the chaos out into its component pieces to make order.
Mm-hmm.
That's the idea. Okay, so chaos returns when things leave their boundaries and come back together.
Oh.
That's the mythological meaning of the flood, right? So God separates the waters from the waters to bring dry land. Now, the ancient people often thought that the sky was blue because there was water up there,
mm-hmm.
right? So he separated the water above from the water below. So you got the sea, and above is the other water. And that made another kind of sense because occasionally water would fall from the sky.
Yep.
So it made sense. It's like, well, it's blue, and sometimes it comes down. So maybe that's water, right? And then down here, so he separates the water from the water, and then you have the dry land in between. The symbolic meaning of the flood is that then the waters rise again to touch, so they meet again. Chaos has returned.
Oh.
The waters come down from the heavens, and they come up from the earth, and they meet, and they swallow the dry land, right? It's an undoing of creation.
Mm-hmm.
God was sorry that he had made the world because of the sin in it, and so he decides to erase it,
mm-hmm.
right? That's the symbolic meaning of that. The flood is the return of chaos. Because water, even in Jungian and Freudian psychology and dream analysis, always stands for chaos and the unconscious, right? Always has, because you can't. There's no terra firma when you're in the middle of the ocean, right? You're just going to drown.
Yeah.
That's why it's there. There's no firm place to stand in water. So water is your chaotic point. So what happens when these borders break down is chaos and death. So another place in Scripture, it talks about God has said to the sea, "Here you shall come and no farther," right? And created the coastline.
Yep.
What happens when that stops? A hurricane or a typhoon or a tsunami? Death. The borders stop being erased. So the borders mingle. So these things that should be separate overlap, and it causes chaos and death. Like the terrible Indian tsunami some years ago killed so many people because the sea just decided, I don't want this border anymore. Woof.
Yeah.
Right? Overcomes it. Another way is if things come down out of heaven, right, to earth, and I don't mean in a spiritual manner, I mean in a very physical manner, like a meteorite's crash, right? Then again, death and destruction. It's come out of the place it was supposed to be in the heavens down to earth where it's not supposed to be. The borders have been blurred and you get destruction. Not far. I mean, it is far, but it's sort of in my general quadrant of America here is the Mile Wide Crater. Have you ever been out to see it?
No.
There's a park out here. It's called Mile Wide Crater, and it is what it sounds like. It's a mile wide crater. You can go see, and it's from an ancient meteorite impact on the American Southwest, and it's probably why the desert is a desert.
Huh.
It's called Meteor Crater, I think. Anyway, yeah, it's in Arizona, but it's a brilliant. I think it's called meteor wide. But I've heard it called mile wide crater. Let's see, the diameter. It's actually 0.7 miles diameter, but pretty big. It's pretty close to a mile.
Still, good crater.
It's a big crater, and you can go stand on the edge of it, and it's like this thing is probably why the Mojave Desert is a desert. Also, the Gulf of Mexico is vaguely circular, probably because of a meteorite impact, right? All these things, meteorite impacts and the flood, if the theory of the impact at the top is correct, causing the flood, meteorite impacts have they've been the great introducers of chaos, right? Even mainstream science agrees that's how the dinosaurs went away, right? So it's these things, it's the breakdown of separation. And again, like, that's what the holiness was trying to get at. It's trying to preserve this, symbolically preserve the borders that allow existence to happen. And that's what a lot of these purity laws were about. Like people are like, oh, they're hygiene. And yes, but that's secondarily, right? Because it is true that if you put your toilet in your kitchen, you're going to have problems. Yeah. You're going to have little monsters are going to escape and start eating you alive from the inside. Because like bacteria, viruses. You should not mix where you go to the bathroom with where you eat. Don't put your toilet in the kitchen. Don't cook in the bathroom, right? You need that separation. And that separation allows existence to continue, right? That's what hygiene laws are about. This is why religious purity laws are the same thing or a foreshadowing of spiritual purity laws. You wash your hands, you be clean, you separate, right? And that allows existence to happen. And then it's realized later as you get around to the time of Christ, it's like, but you have to separate the things out from your soul. You need the inward washing, the baptism, right?
Yep. So let's do a little aside here and examine a couple of modern ideas and concepts in relation to this. So the first one that came to my mind was the singularity. The idea of the singularity is sort of an anti-creation. If the creation was separating the things and from chaos and separating them into order, bringing them all together is the opposite of that, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And
then also the kind of the modern recent fascination with poop and butts.
Yeah.
There's like toys for children that you play with rainbow sparkly poop and you eat poop and poop board games, and it's like everything's poop and butts and stuff.
Yeah. And
not to mention, sodomy, and drag queen story hour and all that stuff. It's like you you're taking from the reproduction, the male and female, the separation that brings forth life.
Right.
You're synthesizing it into drag queens and depraved acts that have no chance of creating life, but in fact usually lead to death.
Right. And create things like AIDS.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. It's so you have this non-separation and and again, like I said, the modern world is giving rebirth to the ancient mythological. Like the transgender person is the ancient hermaphrodite. Right. Yeah. Hermaphrodite is Hermes and Aphrodite put together. Hermaphrodite. Right.
Oh, okay.
So that's the whole. It's this. Now there's a flip side to this where this stuff can be positive. Mm-hmm. Right. I don't want to ignore that because again, from decay comes life also. Mm-hmm. Right. Like plants spring out of fertilizer.
Right.
Right. So we can discuss that too. But you do need this holy separation. That's what these purity laws were about. And then so Christ comes along and he's like, well, but like, look, so yeah, you got this outward separation, but inwardly you're like graves. Mm-hmm. Like you're outwardly like well clean tombs, but inside you gotta attend to that separation. Right. Also. Right. It's not just about the outward appearance. It's not that that's unimportant, right? To have physical cleanliness and stuff. Mm-hmm. It is, but he's going into a deeper level. And so things are beginning to break down because we don't want to have borders anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's at every level. I'm not even I agree that immigration is a problem, but I'm not like freaked out about it. Yeah. But you see this lack of wanting borders in every place in the world.
Oh yeah.
Even to the point of like open concept housing. Yeah. Like you want an open concept design to your house. You want an open office plan where everyone mm-hmm. works in no rooms. Yep. You want no national borders. You don't want borders between men and women. It's all anti-existence.
Well, think about all the different layers of intimacy that have been stripped from human society. Yes. And like the tribe and clan level. Mm-hmm. That's gone. Then people lived in the extended family model up until the Industrial Revolution. That's gone. Then you had single families, but they had a bunch of kids. Living in one home together, and now that's gone. Now we've got tiny, small families / no families at all / nomads living in Slab City, not having any kids or whatever, yeah. Or living in a giant megacity in a coffin apartment. They're like, why would I reproduce? You've got 25-year-old men having vasectomies before. It's like we're being atomized further and further and further and further.
And the atomization is a good analogy for it because atoms are all the same. Mm-hmm. So like this is the nefarious aspect to equality because how do you make a forest equal? With an axe. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Everyone is equal only when they are dead. Yeah. Which is what all the communists eventually find out. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Because existence requires differentiation. Yeah. Like a uniform soup that's the primordial chaos again. Yeah. Like unity isn't sameness, right? But like imagine if your blood if you did this with your body and your blood gets from where it's supposed to be into your lungs where it's not supposed to be. Yeah. Yeah. You start to die very quickly. Or vice versa, if the air from your lungs gets into your bloodstream, like an embolism, mm-hmm. right? An air bubble in your lung, you also begin to die very quickly. These borders exist within your body. Like here's where the one thing goes, here's where it doesn't. This is why people always said cleanliness is next to godliness. Mm-hmm. Because if you have things in proper position, that's the way you fight against the chimera. Right. Right. The chimera is two things being brought to, and that always produces a monster. Well, the restoration of order is how the chimera is pushed back. Right. Yep. Okay. Like the chimera would always come in mythology when people were doing something they weren't supposed to do. transgressing against something, and then the chimeras start to appear out of the woodwork, right? So that's the first kind of monster, is the chimera. And we're starting to bring those back, like CRISPR technology and all this stuff, transgenderism. They're starting to reemerge into the world, right? Okay, but the other type of monster is the amorphous monster. Okay. And this is something that has no defined shape. The blob. You can think about,
The Blob.
The Blob. Yeah, there was a movie about the Blob. Yeah. Also, Alien, right? Just this alien. It can come. It gets into your body and then it comes out sort of looking like it can be anything. Yeah. There was a movie just called It. It's like, what is it? Or The Thing. Like The Thing. Okay. So the amorphous monster is a representation of death and chaos resulting not from mixing things where they shouldn't be, but from lack of understanding. Right. So something has entered into your field of vision or your experience that you don't understand, you don't comprehend, you can't get a handle on it, and it's causing destruction. Yep. That's the amorphous monster. How do you beat the amorphous monster? Well, you beat the amorphous monster by learning about it. Right. All of these sci-fi shows that have the amorphous monster, like for instance, The Thing. Yeah. Once you learn more about it, you learn its weakness. Like they learned it was fire. It was weak to fire. They learned how to deal with the alien. Once you figure it out, then you begin to understand its weakness. Gotcha. So the amorphous monster is a mythological, psychological interpretation of that which you don't understand, which is destroying you. But if you do once you do understand it, you can begin to be victorious over it. Okay. And then the third kind of monster. So we've got two kinds. The chimera you fight by reintroducing separation. The amorphous you fight by knowledge. And then you've got the twisted/inverted monster, which unfortunately the mythology and popular culture only thinks you can kill. And that may be right. I think there's a redemptive art to this, that you could redeem the twisted inverted, but in most mythology, you just end up having to kill them.
What's an example of a twisted inverted?
A zombie. Okay. A ghost, a serial killer, psycho, something like that. Okay. Or even a giant, really. Yeah. I mean, a giant sort of straddles both, because it's like a person that's been twisted and they do cannibalism, but they're also like part angel, so they're a chimera. Okay. Okay. All right. So notice the zombie and the ghost are two flip sides of the same coin. One is the body without the soul. The other is the soul without the body. They're both monstrous because human being has to have both. Now, the thing about the twisted monster is the danger of the twisted monster is that it can turn you into a monster too. The zombie can bite you and turn you into a zombie. In many ghost movies, the ghost kills you and then you become a ghost, and you're also part of the hauntings, right? Okay. If you're dealing with a psycho, right, you may also be driven insane while you're trying to resist him. Right. So that the danger of the twisted inversion model that's the great danger, is that you will become the monster also. Right. It will pull you in. And the only ways that we know of to deal with these things is you kill. Like the zombie, you always just have to hit him in the head. Yep. Right. And the twisted inverted monster is always after the thing that it is lacking. So the zombie has no agency, and so it's after brains. Right. It has no agency, so it's like brain, because it doesn't have that. The ghost has no body, so it's often trying to possess people. Trying to possess the body, right? Okay. The psycho is always driven by something he didn't receive in childhood, or some obsessive compulsive, like something he doesn't have is driving him to do his murders. Right. Right. So the twisted inverted monster is always driven by something he doesn't have, and if he takes it from you, you become a monster also. Right? The zombie bites you, tries to eat your brains. He maybe gets some of your brains, and now you're a zombie also. Right? And so those are the three types of monsters. You've got the chimera, the amorphous, and the twisted. And this provides you a mythological map for dealing with problems and things that arise in the world that threaten to kill you, like the reintroduction of chaos, the things you don't understand. Now, where do monsters happen? Take a guess.
Old abandoned buildings, insane asylums,
maybe
spiritual nexuses.
I'm talking more. more of a folklore psychological position.
Oh, they live in caves? I don't know.
I was going for now. All your answers were not bad, but I was going for bridges. Like
what?
Times of transition.
Okay.
This is why trolls live under bridges.
Oh.
You see? Because when you go from the time that this chaos can be introduced, the time when borders can break down, the time when something amorphous can arise that you don't understand that will threaten you, right, is when you're transitioning from one place or phase to another.
Okay.
This is why we're in such a, because we're transitioning from the old world of like we rode on horses and we have these things to this new world where they're hyper connected and everyone can travel everywhere all the time. We have all these new powers that we didn't in the like nuclear bombs, machine guns, biological warfare that was just not an option 200 years ago.
Yeah.
It wasn't there. And so this transition to a new world has brought with it the potential for chimeras and these things that you don't understand. So when you're transitioning from one place to another place, that's when these monsters can arise.
Okay.
Like when you're transitioning to, say, parenthood, right? These things can come up. When you're transitioning into older age, when you're transitioning into a new phase of your relationship, into a new job, into any of these things, that's when these monsters, I'm using it metaphorically here, can come into being. Although also physically, right? I'm not discounting at all that sometimes people see a Mothman,
sure,
that with red glowing eyes. But I'm just saying, from a psychological point of view, that's why trolls are said to live under bridges.
Okay,
right,
that tracks.
And this is the crazy thing is that we know all this like this, but we haven't ever thought about it. Like because it makes sense in stories, but then you say, well, why does that make sense? And then you begin to dissect it and you're like, oh, I see what my subconscious is saying here, right? What the collective subconscious of man is saying. Now, so so that's why trolls come out of the bridge. And this is also why monsters always give you riddles, right? So like think of the Sphinx riddle, right? The ancient thing where like the Sphinx is going to eat you unless you answer his riddle. And Billy Goat's gruff, you have to trick the Billy Goats. When the troll jumps out from under the bridge, the Billy Goats have to trick the troll into letting them pass. Okay. Right? Rumpelstiltskin, you have to solve Rumpelstiltskin's riddle or else he takes your baby. Okay. Right? What's that saying? Well, again, it comes from this. The idea presented there is that the monster arises because of something you didn't understand. Something you've mixed things that shouldn't have been mixed. You don't have a handle on something that you should, and so the monster has come. And so you have to answer the riddle. And if you answer the riddle, you get away. But if you don't, you die. And that's why to demonstrate something comes from the same word. It means to demonster, to demonstrate. Oh. Because once you demonstrate, you've taken away the monster. Once you understand. So like we have all these questions in our modern world that have arisen because we've been crossing over all these bridges of transition. And then these are the riddles that are being posed. Like, why should we keep the traditional family unit when the Darwinian selection pressures are no longer applied? Like, what's the purpose of borders in an age of globalization? Why shouldn't the individual have free and total choice over every aspect of his life? Why are not men the same as women? Why shouldn't we clone human beings? Like, why, all of these questions, these riddles have arisen. They used to be taken for granted. Yep. But new circumstances have brought new challenges to them.
Well, we tore down a bunch of walls and we didn't know why they were built in the first place.
Yes.
And now we're facing what was on the other side of it.
Right. Yeah. Right. The challenge is to answer these riddles, if for no one else, then at least for yourself. I mean, you may not be able to you probably won't be able to convince the broader public. But if you are able to answer these questions for yourself, it goes a long way to helping your own personal situation. Okay. Like, there's a lot of people around me dealing with monsters right now, like that guy over there viciously flogging a barbed wire fence. He's just going to town. I don't know what's going on in his head. For some reason, he feels that he has to attack that fence with his jacket.
Should ask him why the fence was built.
Huh?
You should ask him why the fence was built.
I should say, do you know why are you tearing down that fence? Do you know what? And he'll say, well, there's bombs on the other side from this. Unexploded bombs. A couple of these, Radar and Dish have a lovely bomb they pulled out. Sometimes they drop duds. Mm-hmm. Because they don't want to spit because ordnance is expensive.
Oh, sure.
So the Air Force has a bunch of just duds that they target practice with. Mm-hmm. And Radar and Dish have pulled one of these from the range over into their shanty here, and it looks beautiful.
Yeah.
It looks very heavy, but they're a lovely couple. I'm staying with them for the evening.
Nice.
In between my sabotaging of the. Well, let's not say sabotaging. That's a bit of my data acquisition of NASA's.
Okay. Yeah.
Satellite dish. Mm-hmm. I'm working with the SETI people on this one. Mm-hmm. Let's just say that. But yeah, that's the meaning of monsters. Like that's like what monsters are trying to get you to understand, and that's also it ties into the giants. It ties into the Bigfoot.
I found that enlightening. That was neat. That was a lot to think about.
It's all connected. It's all connected. Mm-hmm. My one of our MAPS members, he told me, I tuned in wanting to hear the ravings of a madman, and instead I tuned in and heard the coherent worldview of a madman. And I was like, thank you. That's correct. This is all coherent. It is also a little strange.
The coherent worldview of madmen.
I'm in Slab City right now.
Yeah.
You're with the mole people, or soon to be.
Yep.
And we're all just going to have a great time. America's going to do great, even if it's not here anymore in a couple of years.
Yeah.
We're just going to have a great time.
I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. And if anyone is out here in Slab City, try to give me a shout out. We'll hang out. Look, Radar and Dish do not go by Radar and Dish to other people, so you just have to figure it out. There's a subtle clue here as to who I am and they are. And if you're around, you'll notice. Shouldn't be that hard, but I'm not going to give the feds anything to work with.
Right on. Well, we should also have our audience check in with us at mapsoc.org, mapsoc.org, and they can send us some tips or some complaints about the show.
Right. Yeah, and you can do your Patreon by, again, throwing your money into a river.
Yeah, throw $20 out the window. That's how you contribute to our Patreon.
Yeah, so you break the spell of the hold of money over your life, and you stop worshiping mammon.
There you go.
I knew a guy who was a president of a company. He had a real picture of mammon up on his wall.
Sounds legit.
It did. Hey!
How dare you?
Hamburger, bang, bang!
Every inch of you is amazing.